Sounds good.
Let's see. Are we set? I gotta check Zoom. Okay. Yes. All right. Hello, everybody.
Hello, everybody.
Welcome to our Stone Center and Tinker Foundation summer grant session, info session. We're glad that you all could be here today. And I know we have a lot to cover. And we are anticipating that we have a lot of questions, and we hope that we'll be able to try and at least address some of them. I'm not going to say answer, but at least address them. Jimmy, you want to start us off?
Sure. Yeah, so I'll start up with what the purpose of the Summerfield Research Grant Program has been and still remains, and then we'll talk a little bit about how it's shifted a little bit in terms of the particulars because of the current environment we're in. But our Summerfield Research Grant Program, in a nutshell, is basically to provide funding for graduate students to get some field research experience. We collaborate with the Tinker Foundation, which provides funding that helps to support graduate student field research. And the Tinker Foundation has its own set of requirements that we'll talk about too. But the goal really is to provide funding for students who are at the beginning stages of their research, and to help them kind of get some initial experience in doing field research. So, with that, yeah, go ahead, Val. You jump in whenever.
I was just going to say, we're kind of jumping through the first 3 slides here, so I might jump in. I might switch a slide while we're talking with each other. Like Jimmy says, we do have a grant from the Tinker Foundation, and it's a grant that has required matching funds that we provide. And this year, I just wanted to add that we will have more than $30,000 available in that pot of money. And usually we only have $30,000, but we do have additional funds from summer 2020 that we've been given permission to carry forward for new grantees. And that's the key word there. I don't think we have any previous grantees here right now, but no, Catherine, but we can address those later. Here,
Right.
Jimmy, that's what you started talking about.
Yeah, and just that the program really is designed to give students with little to no field research experience to kind of explore the possibility or the feasibility of doing research that could later translate into a dissertation project or a thesis project. And I'll talk a little bit more about this particular slide in a second. But I did want to say that we are, running the grant program, obviously. So even though we might not be able to fund travel to the region, depending on how the pandemic situation shapes out, we're still running the program as if that would be possible. Going into the field would be possible. So the applications itself are really encouraging applicants to think about going into the field and doing field research. But we do have an alternative that we'll discuss too for a non-field research addendums request for funding in that eventuality. So what you're going to see when we go through the program really is going to be emphasizing or focused on this idea of in-field research. And so we'll talk about that, and the expectation is that you'll put in an application that's directed towards that, and then towards the end we'll have some presentations about the alternative funding possibilities if you can't go into the field. So as I said, the grants are intended to be for students who are at the beginning stages of their graduate studies. It doesn't preclude more advanced students or students who have received the grant multiple times from applying, But I will say this, if you're at the dissertation stage, then you're likely going to fall really low on the list of preferred students to fund, because you should be applying for Fulbrights, NSF grants, and so on at that particular stage. And besides which, these are just small amount grants that are really intended to give students a taste of being in the field and what it's like, and get a sense of what doing a longer field research project might be. The Tinker Foundation has a restriction that those conducting research must do so in Spanish or Portuguese speaking Latin American or Caribbean countries. So it has to be out of the country. That's why Puerto Rico is not eligible for Tinker funds, and they have to be in Spanish or Portuguese speaking countries. French, Anglophone, Caribbean are not eligible for Tinker funding, although we in the Stone Center will, and we'll talk about this, we in the Stone Center have set aside some funding for students who want to do Latin American, Caribbean relevant research in non-Spanish or non-Portuguese speaking regions, or to work on Puerto Rico for that matter. We also, part of the grant requirements is that any publication that you might produce out of the research has to acknowledge the Tinker Foundation if it's funded by Tinker resources.
And you'll know that from your award letter, whether your grant was funded with Tinker funds. We say that outright, right, in your award letter.
But you can pretty much bank on the fact that if you're applying to do field research in a Spanish or Portuguese speaking country of the Latin American and Caribbean, you're going to get Tinker funding, at least in part.
Right. So we, as Jimmy just implied, we do have a modest amount of funding to conduct research in countries that are not Spanish or Portuguese speaking, and Puerto Rico for that matter, and Europe for that matter. We have funded proposals to go to Europe as long as it was a Latin America related research project. And so you all, those proposals go through the same exact process. Also, for those students who are unable to leave the US for visa or immigration status reasons, you might also, are eligible to apply for funding. So that we want to make sure that you all have access to funds also. But the last point is really important because applicants must clearly demonstrate linguistic competency in whatever country you're going to. And that's really an important point, and you need to emphasize that in your application. All right, the COVID situation.
Okay, so as you all probably remember, if you've been here or if you're a new student, you might not know this, but can imagine this. The university is currently not allowing funds to be passed through the university to pay for international travel unless you seek a specific exemption for doing so. And I know some graduate students have been able to do that, but it's a process you have to go through with the provost office. But currently, due to travel restrictions, we can't fund any travel to the region, and any future travel is subject to approval by the university because of the current environment. That said, if research travel is not possible, we are committed in the Stone Center to working on providing additional opportunities for non-travel summer research funding. And that's why we have, as a part of this application process, you'll see, we're doing something we haven't done in previous grant calls for proposals, is to submit an alternative Plan B addendum for non-travel summer research. And we're going to talk about this alternative Plan B addendum later on in the presentation towards the end. So I'll put that on hold for right now. We'll continue talking about the summer field research grant, the normal application process right now. Val, can't hear you.
I was trying to cut down on the, because Jimmy and I are sitting right next to each other in the office. I was trying to cut down on
Uh,
our echo. Okay, students must plan at least 2 weeks in the field. We are very strict about that. Normally, and I say ordinarily, field research is conducted between May 15th and August 15th, 2021, but I've put a COVID note here. Grant recipients will have until the end of fall 2021 into the winter break, so obviously into January, to use your field research grants if you are awarded them this year. Field research, you are not eligible for other Stone Center funding, so you either go for a field research grant, or a lot of people apply for FLOSS fellowships also for language study. Really important, and you'll work closely with Jimmy on this. Students must enroll as full-time students in the semester after the grant is awarded, so you can't be graduating. And students who have standing incompletes will forfeit your summer grant. So please try to keep in touch. If you do have an incomplete at the end of the semester, just please stay in touch with Jimmy, because he does monitor that.
right.
And once the grant is awarded, you must tell us if you change anything major about your plans, because we have to report the details of your plan back to the Tinker Foundation.
And also just a little, sorry, Val, just a little coda to the your eligibility and being full-time student status in the semester after the grant. It's not that after the grant is, we notify you of the grant. It's really the semester after you plan to utilize the grant. So if COVID restrictions mean that you're not going to use the grant until December, then you can't graduate in August, or you can't even graduate in December and use it in the winter break. Once you're no longer a student, you have to be an enrolled student in the semester subsequent to when you plan to do the research and use the grant. Just a code on that. Okay, so if your proposal does require human subjects, you will still be required to go through the IRB process. Probably more important now that you get review in dealing with human subjects because of the COVID situation. So, if you know your proposal is going to involve human subjects, start that process right now. If you're not sure whether your project would require you to go through IRB approval, talk to your advisor. Your faculty advisor probably has a better sense of that. Or you can reach out to the office that manages the IRB process to see if your project should go through the process. You can see we give priority to students who haven't received summer funding through this grant program previously, and also to students who are at the beginning stage of their programs, usually who are in the coursework phase of their programs. Again, that doesn't mean that if you don't fall into those categories that you're going to be completely excluded. But it does mean that we do tend to give priority and preference to students who meet beginning and preliminary stages expectation of the grant program. Fortunately, this is one of the grant programs that do allow non-US citizens to apply. So you can be an international student and apply to receive funding through this grant program. You're not excluded.
Okay, some of the allowable costs to request. Obviously, round trip airfare, in-country transportation costs. That's please note that, because we find that some people forget to include. They need to get around, they need to take buses, they fly into a capital, they need to go to a different city. Please include those costs. Your housing costs, and notice we put housing costs and food allowance. Please be reasonable and appropriate. We do not suggest using the GESA's international per diem rates, because those are a lot higher than what are accepted or or rates that we know that you can rent a room, get a hotel room, or that you can eat on. So be reasonable. And I will say our faculty committee is very knowledgeable about those rates also. And keep any additional costs to a minimum. So, just thinking about being very reasonable about your costs. And if you have questions on this, you can always ask Jimmy or I, really anything.
Right. And along with that, I wanted to add about the round trip airfare. No, you shouldn't put a price in there in the budget requesting something that would be first class airfare or business class airfare costs, because that's, our committee's going to look at that and say, I know, I've been there many times. I know you can get an airfare for a reasonable price for half that price. So be conscious of that. But also don't undercut yourself too. Reasonable round trip airfare means you don't need to get the rock bottom discount airline price to put that in your budget. Just look at what a normal kind of like middle range airfare would be to go to your research site, and that would be fine.
Yeah, that's really important point there. Don't search for the lowest price and put that on your proposal, because you're not going to buy that ticket right away. That's really, keep that in mind, because there is quite a bit of lag time, quite a bit, before you submit your application until you actually get the funds for your grant, if you're awarded one.
Right. Okay, so this is also very important too. It's a requirement of the Tinker Foundation and of us here in the Stone Center. We expect a terminal report that will outline, the findings of your summer research experience. And it's due normally on September 15th, 2021, if students are allowed to do field research over the summer. And we outline this and we explain it in the award notices that you'll get after applying. You have to present your field research project or a summary report of your alternative Plan B project, which we'll talk about later, at a weekend symposium sponsored and organized by the Stone Center. Some of you have already presented there, some of you are familiar with it or have seen it even this past fall. So that's a requirement of the grant. You have to file a report and then you have to present it publicly in a symposium. Now, because we're allowing students who maybe get an award for this summer to delay until the fall or the winter break, if that's your situation, then you'll still have to present a written report and also make an oral presentation, but we'll extend that deadline from September 15th to some other date after your proposed research timeline would be. But you'll still have to meet those obligations. And again, any publication you may get out of this summer research should acknowledge the Stone Center and the Tinker Foundation as helping to support the research.
Okay, so I'm going to go over some of the requests that do not qualify for funding, although I will say there's always there's always conditions to this. Everything is not as black and white. So projects that do not involve international travel to Latin America or the Caribbean. So those do not qualify for Tinker funding. There is a possibility that you could get Stone Center funding. You don't have to tell us that in your proposal. We determine that when we look at it, and the faculty committee does. Really important note here, and I know that Jimmy will talk about this a little more, projects that involve working for an agency or organization and that do not, in which you do not have your own individual research project. And I'll put Jimmy, circle back to that. Also, projects that involve coursework or tuition fees. Again, I'm going to go back and say this does not qualify for Tinker funding, but there's a possibility that it could for the alternative Plan B funding from the Stone Center. So this year, obviously, for everything under the sun is a little different.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So these are really, primarily restrictions for Tinker funding, and also for the restrictions that are applied to the summer field research grant application. not to the alternative Plan B application that you should also plan to submit as a part of your application. In jumping back to the projects that involve working for another agency or organization, this really is addressing the idea that this is a grant for you to do your research. It is not a grant that pays you to do somebody else's research for them. They should be paying you to do research for them. And so it doesn't mean you can't work on a larger project or be a part of a larger project, just that the funding that we provide has to go to support your own research. Even if your own research is taking place on a site or with an organization that is a part of another faculty member or researcher's larger project.
Mm-hmm. Right. And again, if you have any questions about any of these, if you want, and you don't want to bring it up today, write us an email, either of us, and we're happy. We can jump on a Zoom call. If you don't want to Zoom, we can actually speak to you on the telephone. It's possible.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, summer field research grants. What are our priorities? Applicants who have a clear plan of action. So make sure that you kind of set out exactly what you're going to do. And I'm going to say for all of this, work with your faculty advisor, the person especially who's going to write your letter of recommendation. Projects that are viable and can be completed in the time planned, important. Projects that are well conceived, have strong faculty support, and show evidence that the candidate has worked. Okay, I'm just reading this, but you can read this. You're kind of getting it. Make sure you're working with your faculty sponsor. And this last point is really important. Please make the case that you can't do this project without field work. Now, that's the field research project. What we are telling you is that if you can think of ways that you can advance your research while not going into the field, that's going to be your addendum. That's going to be your alternative Plan B proposal and we will get to that. We're almost to that slide, but we want to go through the field research first.
Right.
Maybe you want to add?
No, I think that's great. Yeah. That covers everything that I could think of. So I'll take this one. So how do you apply? Well, it's very simple. You submit a completed application form, which you can access through our website. You also need to have a faculty recommendation form completed by a faculty sponsor, usually someone from your department or your advisor. That needs to be submitted. Are we doing the email address thing?
No,
it's okay. So
no.
this is old. I think now we have a Qualtrics.
Everything is an online application.
An online application. So you fill it out online through our system. I think we use Qualtrics to do that by the deadline, which is February 26, 2021. So no more emailing it to a box folder and having your faculty do the same. But all this is listed in the application guidelines that you can access on our website. Okay.
Yes, that, and I've already sent out, I think, one reminder. I'll send out another reminder again. I think I've sent out 2 notices already, and we will continue doing that. There are direct links from those emails to the online application. And also on the website, we do have a sample of the application, like what it looks like. So you can look at that PDF and know how to prepare your full application. I think it's an important point, because I know that Hannah Palmer would want me to tell you that it is a Qualtrics form. So you really need to have all your materials ready ahead of time, like have everything written. And that's why it's important to download that PDF and kind of look at it, have all your numbers ready so that you can just be ready to fill out the form and upload any documents in the questions that ask for uploads. I also want to remind you all that it's a Qualtrics form. I know we keep saying that, but you need to complete your session while you're doing it. I believe you can return to your Qualtrics form and continue the form if you return to the same site. You keep it like up in a browser from the same IP address within 2 weeks. That's too complicated. Just be sure to have all your materials ready ahead of time. And for those of you who have applied before, you can see we've moved back the deadline. It is now February 26th, so in 1 month.
Yeah, so for Val, you were cutting in that a little bit there. So for those who didn't get exactly what Val was saying, is basically because it's a Qualtrics form, you should already have all your information ready to go before you start it, because sometimes you start back and finish it, but Qualtrics is really odd and weird in that way. You have to go back from the same ISP, and you have to do it within 2 weeks. Otherwise, it'll disappear and you can't recover what you've already put in. So just have everything ready to go in one shot, one fell swoop. And when you get on the Qualtrics form, you'll have it all there. You can just do it and then submit it and not have to worry about that.
Okay, I think I'm going to be better now that I'm actually wired into my computer. Bluetooth's
Yes.
wonderful, but my Bluetooths are acting weird lately. Okay, so here's where we talk about the submission of the alternative Plan B non-travel research support. Guess what? It's the same form. So if you just download that PDF, you can see we have created a space for you to submit your alternative funding proposal for non-travel research. And you can upload documents there and all that. Got somebody else coming in. Yeah, Dariana must have gotten kicked
I think
out.
she got kicked out and now she's back.
Coming back in. Okay. All right.
Okay, so what is this alternative Plan B thing that you are encouraged to put in? And I would really, encourage all of you to think, okay, I got to put in a field research grant proposal as if we're going to be able to send you out into the field this summer. But also, the reality is such that it's probably going to be unlikely that the university, unless there's some really quick advances with the vaccination program and a decrease in cases, that the university probably won't allow field research travel over the summer, at least not until the later part of the summer. So all of you should put in a Plan B, an alternative Plan B funding. We'll consider your primary application for field research, and we'll also make a funding decision about your alternative Plan B funding too. So what is this alternative Plan B funding? Okay, it is a funding program that will potentially have access to Tinker Foundation funds. I think they're modifying their requirements, but they've been very specific about what they will allow to use their funds for that don't require going into the field. And you can see this list right here on this slide outlines some of the things you can put in your alternative Plan B funding proposal that is eligible for Tinker Foundation fundings. So these are some of the things: access to digital resources, access to primary documents, software, hardware equipment up to $200, transcription, translation, interpretation services, compensation for local collaborators at the field site. So if you have a friend who works in the country of your research who's willing to go out and do some, digging for you or interviewing for you, you can put in for funding that Tinker will pay as a part of this non-field research Plan B. And also connectivity, internet access, phone cards, expenses to communicate with folks, resources, contacts in the field. So those are some things that you can include in your alternative Plan B funding that are eligible for Tinker funds. but this is it. Anything you think you might need alternative funding for is that doesn't include any of these items is not going to be eligible for Tinker funds. However, the Stone Center is going to put aside a little bit of money that isn't encumbered by Tinker Foundation guidelines. And we'll consider the following additional costs in your proposal, Plan B, alternative Plan B funding proposal for these kinds of expenses: program fees for methodology seminars, workshops, or other technical training programs, tuition and fees for language training programs for students that are ineligible for FLOSS or for languages that do not qualify for FLOSS funding. And I remember, Dariana, you were asking about this during the FLOSS workshop. We've decided that for this summer, we want to make it possible for students who are ineligible for FLOSS, but who still want to participate. They can put in a request for funding, tuition and fees for a FLOSS program. You can also put in expenses related to relevant internships or practicum experiences, or local transportation expenses. If you're in New Orleans and you need to get to an archive, or you need to go talk to a local Latinx community organization about some information, you need to get there by bus, rideshare, taxi, you can put that in your proposal. But all of these expenses should be line items specified in your alternative Plan B addendum budget. You can't just put a general amount and say you're going to do this, this, and this. We want you to specify each of these expenses and provide, where possible, evidence of cost of such expenses with the application. So, for instance, if you have a website address, or you can print out some forms that you can put in PDF format and attach it to your file, that say, this is what this statistics workshop is going to cost. That's evidence of these additional kinds of expenses.
Right. I'm gonna add, Jimmy, also, if we get to a point in the United States, one thing both of us forgot to include are like domestic airfare and transportation within the United States. If it's approved, and we'll cross that bridge when we get to it, to use university funds for that purpose.
Yeah, and I would say too, that last point is very important. Any expenses in your alternative Plan B funding request must be directly related to and necessary for carrying out and advancing your specific research. You can't put in a request for money that is not going to, it might help you survive, but isn't going to be productive and help you move towards your research goals. Although survival is necessary for doing that, but still we want you to think more critically and creatively about how you can use the funds we have to get you from point A to point B in your intellectual and academic program, wherever you happen to be in that process.
I will add that we just finalized these guidelines for the alternative Plan B funding today in consultation with the Tinker Foundation and some other people. I will be adding another kind of addendum guide to the website, and I will send that out via the listservs and other means, so that you can have this list on these 2 pages is not available right now for download, like for a printout, but I will be putting one together so that you can download it from our website to have that in front of you while you're putting together your Plan B funding, your alternative funding.
And that's basically it. I mean, I know it probably seems a little chaotic, but we were working on a tight timeline because the Tinker Foundation just, informed us of what its alternative funding options would be. So if you have any questions or need clarification, now's the time to ask.
I have a question about like if we were to do research in the fall, like what would that look like if we're in classes?
Yeah, that's a good question, Liat. And for students who are still in coursework, the coursework phase, it's probably not going to be something you can do over the fall. It might be something you can do over the winter break, so you might have a month or a month and a half over winter break. So you may fall into that category where if you can't do it over the summer, you can postpone it into the winter break timeframe. But there are students who apply who will be done with coursework, let's say in August, or who may be doing an independent study, the last few courses that will allow them, time to travel into the field. For those students, they may propose, oh, I'll have some free time in October, 2 to 3 weeks, or November, where I can get into the field, and that's what I'd like to do. So you just need to think about what your schedule is going to look like. If you're going to be in classes in the fall, then your plan B you'd probably want to look at the winter break schedule for going into the field. Does that answer your question, Liat?
I got a question. Sorry for arriving a bit later. My question is, first, can the people that was awarded last year apply also for this year?
Yes, you can apply, although we do give priority to students who have never been funded before. That doesn't mean you can't apply again and that you won't be funded. We've funded many students multiple times, but oftentimes it depends on the amount of resources we have available and the amount of new, first-time applicants we have. So you can apply, but those who have never received funding before are going to get priority consideration over those who have received summer research funding in the past.
I understand. Also, this optional Plan B application can also fund internal travel funds in the United States. Did I understand well? So for example, if I arrange to make an independent study during summer with a professor in another university of the United States, that will enrich my research in my topic, that could be paid as a Plan B.
Yes, that's what the Plan B is there for. So like if you need to fly to access an archive or to meet with a professor or take a class, an independent study, like you said, then you can put that in your Plan B. It specify what you need the funding for and provide some kind of evidence of the cost associated with that expense.
I will put a coda on that and say you will still be subject to the regulations of the university and releasing travel funds, but there is a mechanism, and I anticipate there will be probably a more accessible mechanism as the country gets more vaccinated and we see more travel later in the semester.
Yeah, I suspect that what's likely going to happen, although who knows, but I suspect that we're going to see the university relax its restrictions on domestic travel, but still be very cautious about international travel, depending on how the virus is, spreading or what the vaccination system is like in other countries.
I understand. Another question. For example, if somebody get awarded this year and do not have the opportunity to fly over the summer, it's going to be like the last year that they can use it anytime?
Well, that's a great question. I'm glad you asked that because we didn't talk about this. We're saying that you can use it up through either the fall 2021 semester or the winter break 2021-2022. Beyond that, you're not able to use a grant that you apply for right now beyond that, unlike what we did last time, because we're expecting that there's going to be some movement between now and January of next year with regard to, loosening restrictions and some control over the virus that will allow for field research in future summers to go back to normal. So if you get a grant for this summer, then you have to use that grant in some way, shape, or form before the winter break. So we're extending it a little bit, but not like we did last year, just to the winter break 2021-2022. those of you who got funding last summer, you still have that reserved. And you should, you can use that up to the same deadline, up to winter break 2020, 2021, which that's raises an interesting issue, Martin. You still have funding available. So, you know, you would be essentially applying this summer for another grant to do the same kind of research. And that's, you know, we would probably consider your field research grant from last year to be the equivalent of a field research grant you would apply for this year. And you would put in an addendum application, right? You wouldn't have to put in a field research grant if you got funding last summer.
Yeah. So
Right?
yeah, I was thinking on that. So my question is, for example, because my idea of field research is to go to Bolivia. But if I already was awarded to go to Argentina, my idea is that I would not need a complete fare from flying from New Orleans, for example, to Argentina, which actually is really expensive. So my idea was, if I can only apply for like as addendum to continue my research project from Argentina and then going back to New Orleans. Yeah, I can only apply for like that difference, you know, instead of applying for a totally different project or a totally different application. Can I add one thing to the other, or is not allowed to?
Well, I think that's also Catherine's question too. Is
Yes.
if you can add, yeah, I mean, I would say you can revise your 2020 proposal according to the budget that you received. And if there's like, if you wanted to submit a substitute grant proposal that includes 2020, then you can go ahead and do that this particular grant cycle. But you'd be considered for, you know, just one funding amount of money to support that field research project. You know, in other words, you can take what you already have reserved and reconfigure your project and rework the budget, but you can't do two separate proposals for two separate projects and get two separate grants.
I understand. Thank you.
Does that answer your question, Martin?
Yes, somehow it answers my question.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think, Catherine, did that address your concern too?
Yeah, I was just imagining if I needed to rework it somewhat or add on an additional component that would, you know, add on an additional component or modify it in some way. You know, I guess my question is, you know, if I was awarded a certain amount for 2020 that I've deferred, would I modify that through this award process or handle that kind of separately? I guess.
Yeah, we recognize this is probably a situation, and I thought that it would come up. I think that we probably, Jimmy, need to call a meeting with all the 2020 awardees, or like have a conversation about them and see how many of you all are thinking along those lines and how we might modify this process to accommodate, like so that you can do that, because we're open to that. We're completely open to that. It's just, I think you all can see the complications
Absolutely.
of running all these multiple scenarios for funding. But in the end, we want to make sure that we provide you all with the funding that you need for your projects.
Great. Yeah, I think it would be helpful to follow up separately with us, just because if we need to be making modifications per this deadline or through a different process, it'd be helpful to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, my inclination is to say, you know, if your field experience is going to be, you know, different than what you originally proposed, you should just submit in this grant round the kind of like, you know, modified proposal and add any additional budget items to that proposal, indicating you've already got this money in reserve and what you would want to add to that.
Yeah.
And then, you know, that's what I would think, but I think we need to think about this a little bit more here
Yeah.
in the Stone Center.
I'm
we're
gonna,
gonna have-
I will second Jimmy that is my initial thoughts in talking to you all. Because those funds we have earmarked for you, and we wouldn't take them away, we wouldn't modify them. But if you're going to, you know, add on to the project, then obviously you need more funds to do that. So let us confer and talk, and we will definitely get back to you by next week. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Great.
Any other questions? I think y'all already know how to get in touch with the two of us. And as you can see, I mean, not that you all are on campus, but I am on campus rather often. Jimmy's on campus rather often, although we do request that you make appointments if you want to talk to us in person. The phone is answered at the Stone Center, and your phone call is forwarded to either us directly, or you can leave a voicemail for us. And as many of you know, you can write us an email at any hour of the day, and at some point we'll try to write back to you.
Okay, thank you all for your patience and your attention. And again, you can always go back and review this video and conversation, because we're going to upload it on our website. So it'll be there. If there's something you thought you heard and couldn't remember, you can go back and check it out there. We appreciate your time and attention, and look forward to seeing your applications.
Great to see everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.